In 1952, a soil scientist in New Mexico discovered something that should have ended the fertilizer industry. He buried clay pots in the desert, filled them with water, and watched plants thrive in conditions that killed everything else. The water seeped through the clay walls so slowly that 90% remained in the root zone instead of evaporating. Plants grew faster, produced more fruit, and required almost no maintenance. He published his findings. Agricultural journals confirmed the results. Then silence. Today, the global fertilizer industry generates $230 billion annually. The irrigation industry adds another $90 billion. Together, they have spent 70 years making sure you never learn what a $5 bucket and 15 minutes of work can do. Because the moment you bury one container in your garden, you stop buying what they sell. Forever. This is not theory. This is a 4,000-year-old technology that built civilizations in the driest places on Earth. And by the end of this, you will know exactly how to build it yourself for less than $20. Welcome to Recession Roots. Before we dig into this vault, if these roots matter to you, the best way to preserve this knowledge is simple. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share these roots with those who need to remember what we forgot. In 1952, soil physicist D.E. Miller at New Mexico State University conducted the first modern scientific trials. He buried unglazed clay pots in test plots and measured everything. Water usage dropped by 70% compared to surface irrigation. Plant growth increased because roots received consistent moisture without the stress of wet-dry cycles. Soil structure improved because water entered the root zone directly without surface runoff that causes erosion and compaction. Miller published his research. Other scientists replicated it. The data was undeniable. A technology that cost almost nothing outperformed systems that cost thousands. Then the research stopped. By the 1950s, the American agricultural industry had committed fully to a different model. Chemical fertilizers synthesized from natural gas, plastic drip irrigation systems, sprinklers connected to municipal water. Each component required purchase, replacement, and ongoing expense. Farmers became customers. Gardens became markets. A buried clay pot requires none of this. You buy it once. You bury it once. It works for decades. There is no recurring revenue in permanence. There is no profit in self-sufficiency. So the technology that built desert civilizations was quietly filed away while industries sold complexity to people who needed simplicity. The story begins around 2000 BC in what is now northern China. Farmers along the edges of the Gobi Desert faced an impossible problem. Rainfall averaged less than 10 inches per year. Surface irrigation evaporated before roots could drink. Crops withered, villages starved. Then someone buried a clay pot. We do not know their name. We only know what archaeologists found 3,000 years later. Unglazed clay vessels buried neck-deep in agricultural fields, surrounded by root systems that wrapped around them like desperate hands. The pots were not decorative, they were technology. The Chinese called it buried clay pot irrigation. The Romans encountered it and called it olla irrigation, from their word for pot. The Spanish brought it to the Americas. The Persians refined it for desert orchards. Every civilization that faced water scarcity independently discovered the same solution. Bury a porous container, fill it with water, let physics do the rest. The science is elegant. Unglazed clay is porous, filled with microscopic channels too small to see but large enough for water molecules to pass. When you fill a buried clay pot with water, the liquid seeps through those channels into the surrounding soil. But here is where it becomes remarkable. The water only moves when the soil is dry. This is called soil moisture tension. Dry soil pulls water through the clay walls. Wet soil does not. The pot responds to the garden's needs automatically. No timer, no sensor, no electricity. Just physics that has worked for 4,000 years. But the knowledge never disappeared. Permaculture designers in the 1980s rediscovered olla irrigation and began teaching it. Researchers in India and Africa, where water scarcity kills crops and people, continued studying buried clay systems. In 2015, the University of Pretoria in South Africa published trials showing olives reduced water usage by 50 to 70%, while increasing tomato yields by 25%. The plants were healthier, the soil was healthier, the water bill was nearly eliminated. Here is what the fertilizer industry does not want you to understand. Buried pot irrigation does not just save water, it eliminates the need for most fertilizer. When you water from the surface, you create problems. Water hits the soil and runs off, carrying nutrients with it. Water evaporates, leaving mineral salts behind that poison the soil over time. Water saturates the surface, drowning beneficial bacteria and compacting the ground. Then the soil dries out completely, stressing roots and killing the fungal networks that deliver nutrients to plants. This wet-dry cycle destroys soil biology. Dead soil cannot feed plants. So you add fertilizer. The fertilizer salts damage soil further. You add more water to flush the salts. More water causes more runoff. More runoff requires more fertilizer. The cycle continues until you are completely dependent on purchased inputs to grow anything at all. Buried pot irrigation breaks this cycle. Water enters the root zone directly, never touching the surface. No runoff, no evaporation, no salt accumulation, no wet-dry stress. The soil stays consistently moist at the level where roots live and microbes thrive. Fungal networks remain intact. Bacteria populations stay healthy. The living soil feeds your plants the way soil has fed plants for 400 million years. Gardeners who switch to buried pot irrigation report eliminating fertilizer within 2 to 3 years. The soil heals itself once you stop destroying it. The $20 you spend on pots saves hundreds in fertilizer, thousands in water bills, and countless hours of labor. So how do you actually build this? Let me be specific. You need unglazed terracotta pots or food-safe plastic buckets. Terracotta works through natural porosity. Plastic buckets work if you drill small holes in the sides, roughly 1/8 inch diameter, spaced every 2 to 3 inches. Either option costs between $5 and $15. For terracotta, the classic method uses traditional olla pots, which are jug-shaped vessels with narrow necks. If you cannot find ollas, standard terracotta flower pots work perfectly. Take 2 pots of the same size. Use silicone cork to seal the drainage holes. Stack them rim to rim and seal the seam with more silicone, creating a sealed chamber with only the top opening. Total cost around $8. For buckets, use food-grade 5-gallon buckets. Drill holes in the lower 2/3 of the sides. Leave the bottom solid to create a small reservoir. Total cost around $5 if you buy new, free if you ask restaurants for their used food buckets. Choose your location. Each buried container waters a radius of roughly 18 inches in sandy soil, up to 36 inches in clay soil. For a standard raised bed of 4 feet by 8 feet, you need 2 to 3 containers. For in-ground gardens, space them 3 feet apart in a grid pattern. Dig a hole slightly larger than your container. The top opening should sit just above soil level so you can refill it. Bury the container. Pack soil firmly around it. Fill with water. That is it. For the first week, fill your containers daily as the surrounding soil reaches equilibrium. After that, you will refill every 3 to 7 days depending on weather and plant needs. A 5-gallon container. Waters roughly 10 square feet of garden space for up to a week. The water bill drops immediately. Within months, you will notice the soil changing. Darker color, better structure, more earthworms. This is soil coming back to life. Now let me address what nobody else mentions. Winter. In freezing climates, water expands as it becomes ice. Terracotta cracks. Buried containers can be destroyed if left full through winter. The solution is simple. Before first frost, drain your containers completely. Remove terracotta ollas and store them indoors. leave plastic buckets buried but empty. In spring, reinstall and refill. In mild climates where temperatures stay above freezing, your system runs year-round with no modification. Plants slow their water uptake in winter, so you refill less frequently. One more thing the experts never mention. You can combine this with other inputs to create a complete feeding system. Fill your buried containers with compost tea instead of plain water. Add diluted fish emulsion once a month. The slow release delivers nutrients directly to the root zone with no waste and no runoff. You have created a self-watering, self-fertilizing system for less than the cost of a single bag of commercial fertilizer. This is what farmers knew 4,000 years ago along the Gobi Desert. This is what the Romans knew when they built orchards in North Africa. This is what the fertilizer industry has spent 70 years trying to make you forget. You do not need their products. You do not need complex irrigation systems. You do not need to depend on supply chains that fail exactly when you need them most. You need a bucket. You need a shovel. You need $20 and one afternoon. 5 years from now, your neighbors will be calculating water bills and buying another round of fertilizer. You will walk out to your garden, lift the lid of a buried pot, pour in water, and feel something most people have forgotten. Control, not the anxious kind that requires constant management. The quiet kind that comes from knowing your system works, whether you pay attention or not. The fertilizer industry generates $230 billion annually selling products that damage the soil you depend on. The irrigation industry adds $90 billion more selling complexity that breaks, leaks, and requires replacement. Together, they have built an economy on manufactured dependency. A buried clay pot generates zero revenue. It cannot be patented, it cannot be subscription licensed. It cannot be made obsolete by next year's model. It just works, the same way it worked when pharaohs ruled Egypt and emperors ruled China. That permanence is the threat. That simplicity is what they buried. But the knowledge survived 4,000 years of empires rising and falling. It will survive whatever comes next. You can keep buying what they sell, or you can bury a bucket and walk away. If this route revealed something for you, subscribe to Recession Roots and hit the bell. Every like and every share preserves what they tried to bury under $200 billion of advertising. The next route breaks ground soon.